Well, thank the Lord. Run us over to that.
Oh,
We're in the study of Revelation for those who are here for the first time. And we are starting chapter 17 today. So if you're familiar with Revelation, you know that you're coming at the wrong time. As I said last week, we're getting into deep waters and they're not very calm. It is a muddy mess in this creek that we're swimming in. And I think I'd like to start out with a verse that I think we should keep in mind as we go through some of these more difficult parts of Revelation. And it is Romans 14:1. It says, "Welcome anyone who is weak in faith, but don't argue about disputed matters." Now, if you think of faith as understanding, welcome everyone with their understanding. And don't argue about things that are debatable, especially when there's a wide array of different beliefs and understandings and interpretations of things. You can give your opinion, which is beneficial to everyone when you share, but trying to change their mind so that their mind aligns with yours is usually not beneficial. So arguing doesn't help us, but sharing does. And then later in verse 4 of Romans 14, it says, "Who are you to judge another's household servant? Before his own Lord he stands or falls, and he will stand because the Lord is able to make him stand. One person judges one day to be more important than another. Someone else judges every day to be the same. Let each one be fully convinced in his own mind." So it doesn't hurt for us to disagree on a particular passage in a very difficult book in the Bible. And it's not important for us to try to change somebody else's mind. Just share when you want and when you can. So anyway, and we don't, I'm not scolding anybody. I don't think anybody here does that. But that's the mind that we should approach this stuff with. So chapter 17, verse 1. "Then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and spoke with me. Come, I will show you the judgment of the notorious prostitute who is seated on many waters." If you remember, we just come out of chapter 16, where the seven bowls of God's judgment were poured out by seven angels. And as we spoke last week, one of these angels has come back and told John that I'm now going to give you an explanation for what we have just covered in the previous book. So this is a kind of a backup. I told you last week, chapter 16, what the judgments were. Now I'm going to explain some of them to you so that you can understand them better, which is kind of neat because this is the first time an angel has offered to tell John exactly what something means that he saw that was confusing. So that's unique in this book. Okay, so sitting on many waters in usually if you go into a room and everybody stands up but one person, the person that's seated is normally the person in charge, the one with the most authority, the one that everybody respects or puts in a position of respect, like a judge. He comes in, everybody stands up. So he sits down, then everybody else can sit down. So seated on many waters means that this person is important to the world and has some sort of power influence over the world. The many waters, that's one of the interpretations, probably the most common. Many waters means the whole world, the nations and peoples of all the world. Some see that if you take the most literal view, the many waters would be the streams and rivers and canals around the city of Babylon, the original city in the desert with the rivers that flowed through it. And so some people see it as the original Babylon, the city of Babylon, and the many waters surrounding it. Like I said, there's a wide range of interpretations of how to look at some of this stuff. Verse 2.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Just for reference, there's a Babylon in Oklahoma, like what would you reference like that as Babylon? So to speak, like what you're talking about with the waters and stuff like.
Okay, I couldn't, I'm old, my ears are just as old. as my toes is, so if you could speak up a little bit.
Is it like, never mind. It's okay.
Well-
Good, just a little louder.
You can repeat.
I don't, I can't. I don't-
If there was a Babylon in Oklahoma, like what would you reference? Like,
Okay,
you know,
yeah, and the more we get into this lesson, we'll find out that Babylon, in this chapter of Revelation, refers to,
or I guess in today's world, I didn't
Yeah.
mean it's specifiable.
Yeah.
right. Babylon, in terms of this lesson, is speaking of the world system of God denial or Christ denial.
Okay.
In other words, Babylon is the idolatry, represents idolatry, worshiping the tower that Nebuchadnezzar built and said, okay, I am now the God of the earth, and this is my tower, and you'll kneel down and worship it, which is worshiping me. The Roman emperors did the same thing. I am the God now, and you worship me, not that guy that, the people, the old folks worship. So it's a system of government, of finance. It's also, in this chapter, mostly concerned with the spiritual idolatry of humankind. You could call the world before the flood a Babylon. It was a world of Babylon. Nobody was worshiping God. They were all worshiping themselves or other people on earth. So God wiped it out. The Tower of Babel. People were building their own tower to get to heaven and become gods themselves. So it's a spiritual prostitution of God's original intent for men to worship him. So it doesn't. Now, some people, there was a city of Babylon, and it was a kingdom on earth, and the kings of Babylon called themselves gods. So that just becomes the symbol for all those types of societies throughout history. So that's where we're at. And then I'll just kind of give you a summary of what we're going to go through for the rest of
All
it.
right.
No, that's good. Good, we want to know.
But we probably won't get through this one today,
Okay.
so you might not get to see the next week.
If I may, just to kind of make that, what you just said, kind of concrete, sorry to jump in there.
No,
But
sure.
I think a really good way to see it, not about the systems that work in our society, but in all of the advertising
Yeah,
that's out there for
Yeah.
everything, you got to have, you don't have.
yeah,
Look at all of the entertainment that we have, that it's not godly. It pulls
Yeah.
all of us away from godly. So I think that the current way to look at it is what's really trying to influence our hearts.
Yes,
Yeah.
and as we look at the world, my understanding of the overall book of Revelation is that's increasing. In other words, the graduation from, away from God and more anti-God is moving in that direction and has been for 2,000 years, and it will continue to.
If you have a strong faith in God, you can't be bought. So to speak. Right? I mean,
Babylon is alive and well.
Well, she's using the prostitution reference.
Yeah.
Can't be bought. Is that what you were getting at?
well, I don't know. I guess it's just,
The prostitute sells
Okay.
herself
Yes.
Yeah,
to
I
the
would,
world.
I would add to what you said. This angel is going to identify in chapter 17 the spiritual aspects of Babylon. And then in 18, it's going to express the commercial aspects of Babylon. So the monetary system, the world of advertising, that kind of attraction of the one world government is covered more closely in 18, but the spiritual idolatry of the world is more in 17. But you're exactly
You know, the
correct.
same thing now is the same thing in Babylon, and like both of them said, it's what he's really against. God is against spiritual adultery. That's something, false religion,
Mhm,
things that take us away from him.
mhm,
And it all sounds like the same thing.
mhm.
Yes.
Well, when you're talking about advertising, when he mentioned advertising, the first thing I thought of was, you deserve,
Mhm.
you deserve a brand new
Oh, yeah,
Lexus.
that's
You
strong.
deserve
these
this, you deserve, it's all about what
Mhm.
you,
Entitlement.
It's fruit.
yeah.
Mhm.
Well,
That's it, that's it.
I suspect, and I haven't done this, but just by observation, I can't believe it's not true. If you count the number of times that God's name is blasphemed,
Yeah.
Mhm,
in popular culture, in music, in videos, and movies, and TV shows, and
Don't
commercial
forget the memes.
advertising, his name is blasphemed 100 times more now than it was 20 years ago. 1,000 times more than it was 50 years ago.
That's just because you're old. Lord. You're not hip.
Hopefully you never get here.
Yeah.
It's good to be square.
Whole process of Babylon illustrates spiritual idolatry. When the people were building the Tower of Babylon, they kept, the higher they got, the more they developed pride. And they got to a point God destroyed the tower because of man's attempt to reach God with their own effort, which made them prideful. And the root cause of all sin is pride. So we all know what God did to the Tower of Babylon. So Christianity is not a religion, because a religion is man's attempt. Christianity is commitment.
Yes.
Difference between the two. It's a relationship.
Yes.
Okay, so let's go to verse 2.
Say, Roy,
Yeah.
I was just thinking about this 17:1 and how, at least what I see, it's trying to define this this many waters as being Babylon, but it sounds like they mean the Babylon of old, but this is all taking place in a future time, which is, probably somewhere close to now or soon after. And so this Babylon's probably the whole world, isn't it?
I believe so. I believe so. There's some people who take a hard line in the preterist view that all this has already happened, it's already been completed, and it's already done.
Yeah.
Which would mean the original Babylon. Some people think it's all to be done in the future. But you're right. I think it would, in fact, it does define that. If we skip ahead to almost the end.
I see this, we had the same problem we've always had, and it's just getting worse and worse.
Kind of a cycle.
It's an
Yes,
This
accumulation.
repeats. Or
In verse.
I say, to me, it's an accumulation of all Babylon throughout the history of man. And then we're specifically focusing on the end and finalization of man on earth and the Babylon, all consuming and accumulating throughout history, all of them.
I think we see the same concept at work before the flood.
Yes.
The same Babylonian concept of man worshiping himself.
Mhm.
And then the Tower of Babel.
And that's included, and so is
So it's a
so is
repeating
everything.
cycle.
But it's a
Again,
finalization in Revelation. It's the end.
Yeah,
Revelation is
because-
the end.
In verse, in
As we
chapter
understand.
16, it said, came from God, from the temple of God. It said,
Mhm.
it's done,
It is done.
we're finished.
Yes.
So is
It's
the
way-
end of all human history. So that's why this is so significant. But
You look at
Verse-
verse 15, is that what you're
Yeah.
looking for, verse 15?
if you skip to verse 15, he also said to me, the waters you saw where the prostitute was seated are peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages. So it clearly defines those waters later. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're working ahead again. But that's okay.
I'd say that's a first.
Okay. The kings of the earth committed sexual immorality with her, and those who live on the earth became drunk of her sexual immorality. If you remember the dragon and the beast and the false prophet, all sent out emissaries, messengers, they called them frogs, 3 frogs each, to all the kings of the world to get them signed up, get on board. We're creating the anti-God team, the anti-Christ team. We are going to win the war, and then we will own the earth from now on. So they sent out to all these kings, sign up, become part of our group. And these are the kings of the earth that committed sexual immorality with her. They're drunk on her promises, the false prophecies that they spread. They've lost their ability to see and hear clearly, like you do when you drink too much. You start losing the ability to see what's really true and what's not.
Is that true, Diane?
I've seen you.
Verse 3, then he carried me away in the spirit to a wilderness. I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns. So John is being carried away in the spirit, a vision that I guess has motion to it. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I get dizzy when my allergies are all inflamed, but he's carried away in the spirit to a wilderness. And he sees, but he's seeing in a vision. So he's not seeing with his eyes. He's seeing with his mind. And this beast is very similar. If you go back to chapter 13 and verse 1 through 3, it describes the first appearance of this particular beast. It's very, very similar. And most people think it's the same, except that here it's scarlet in color. This is obviously he's seeing the beast after the beast has spilled thousands or millions of saints' blood. So he is bred with the blood of the saints he's killed. Again, if you go back to the preterist view, some believe that this represents Rome, and the beast is the Roman Empire. Some people believe it's the papal system and the revived Roman Empire. So there's a lot of different interpretations. I think it's enough to just see what's being described. The woman is the system of Babylon. Verse 4. The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet, adorned with gold and jewels and pearls. She had a golden cup in her hand filled with everything detestable and with the impurities of her prostitution. This is a good-looking woman with fine dressings and jewelry and a golden chalice sitting on a throne. To the eye, she's very attractive. This is what we're given, this spirit, antichrist spirit of the world. It looks good. It looks attractive. It looks like something everybody, oh, I want to be her friend or her client or whatever you want to call it. But if you compare this with the bride of Christ, the opposite, in verse chapter 19, verse 8, which is a little bit farther down the road, the bride of Christ is described as she was given fine linen to wear, bright and pure, for the fine linen represents the righteous acts of the saints. Not adorned with jewelry, or crown, or golden chalice. It's just white, clean, and pure from the righteousness.
Roy, can I add to that?
Sure.
I think you nailed the entire thing right there. God has always desired from day one to have a bride. Mankind is his bride. And he wants to cherish that bride. He wants to be with that bride, committed, fully committed to bless the bride, to love the bride. And this fornication and these harlots and these, it shows us that we have a choice. We can go and marry ourselves to another husband. And, you know, Satan offers this allure that you spoke of, Roy. But God offers the cleansing we need.
The inner condition.
Yes.
That's what he's concerned with. It looks to be one thing, but on the inside, it's something different. Like white and sepulchre, he talks about in the Gospels. Beautiful on the outside, but inside there's a rotting corpse.
Yeah.
That's why he's concerned with our insides. Add to that.
The golden cup,
Yeah,
which is filled with everything detestable, with the impurities of her prostitution. It's an ugly, ugly thing on the inside. It's only pretty on the outside. And that's the way the world is. It looks attractive. Everybody wants to be successful in the eyes of the world. Look at all the pop stars. They'll say anything, they'll do anything.
The masquerade.
To be the latest, whatever they call
That
it.
false religion falls into that too. Looks good, but not really on the inside of what it really is. It's not. Pulling you away, like he said, pulling you away from God.
I've also heard the word, it's a counterfeit.
Yes, or parody is another way.
Yes, yes.
When I hear counterfeit, I automatically think of Satan all the time trying to counterfeit something. that
What God does.
Yeah.
He counterfeits God. It's always interesting counterfeit. With this accumulation of the cup.
Sorry, Roy.
No problem, no problem, no problem. We all see things differently and at different times, and if we don't share, then we may not see it until a year from now.
That's why I guess we're blessed with different perspectives. So.
Right.
So we would partly describe these as patterns, as something that we tend to see repeat.
Exactly.
Patterns, whatever. The description back in Ezekiel, when judgment was being brought upon Israel for their idolatry, it was compared to, or the analogy was used as Israel was paying their lovers instead of being the prostitute that's receiving. You're the prostitute that's paying your lovers. And this is that same kind of thing. Again, where it's like heaped on. It's not just bad, it's more bad. And you see all of the poison that's in this cup.
So all through the scripture there, it goes back all the way back through there about examples of how judgment fell on those that are committing idolatry and things like that. So I wonder if that's what he's trying to tell us in Revelation is going to happen. Just a little while back there.
Yes, and we talk about this repeating pattern. If you think about Sodom and Gomorrah, not only were they not worshiping God, they were doing all kinds of sexual immorality. In other words, they've lost the whole purpose of God's creation: men, family, marriage, children.
Something like what's happening now.
Yeah, exactly. And we see that pattern today. And
I heard
it's
somebody
getting
say one
worse.
time, if he don't do something before long, this is what I heard, he's going to have to apologize to Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's try to do verse 5. On her forehead was written a name, a mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and the detestable things of the earth. The mother of all bombs we used in Afghanistan. Well, this is the Babylon the Great, the mother of all prostitutes. In other words, this is what we're talking about. The whole world system didn't just happen before the flood or in Sodom and Gomorrah or the Tower of Babel, or it just keeps happening over and over. This concept, this anti-God, anti-Christian concept of Babylon has always been with us, and it will be until it's done, until it's over with, until God finally settles the score and meets out all the judgment that's merited, and we go on. In Rome, during this period of time, just as a side note, the prostitutes in the houses of ill repute actually wore what's called a trumpet, which is kind of jewelry that you drape across your forehead, and they would put their names and their trademark on this frontlet, so that people would remember who they were. You could ask for them by name, and so it was a form of advertising. So on her forehead was written a name, and her name was Babylon the Great, the mother of all prostitutes. And this was alive, if you remember, as we went through the 7 churches, first 3 chapters of Revelation, the first 7 churches, there was only one church that was exempt from this Babylonian influence inside the church. All the rest of them were corrupted at some level inside the church. Some of them completely all the way through, with a few still faithful followers, but each church had some of this influence under various names. But it was alive and attacking the churches and pulling some people away. One more. Verse 6, then I saw the woman who was drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the witnesses to Jesus. When I saw her, I was greatly astonished. Then the angel said to me, why are you astonished? I will explain to you the mystery of the woman and of the beast, and of the 7 heads, and of the 10 horns that carried her. This angel's claiming to do a lot. and maybe the angel does explain it, but it's hard to understand his explanation of what he was trying to explain. But we'll get into that as we go through here. When John realizes the woman is drunk with the blood of the saints, if you go back to chapter 13, verse 7, it says that the beast killed many saints, spilled their blood, killed them, just eliminated. He was successful in doing that. The 3 witnesses, if you'll remember, the witnesses of God that were crying out in public, they were murdered, they were killed. Their blood was spilled in the streets. So part of that is, John is saying, why? How come they're women? They're killing your people, God. He's astonished by it. How can they be so successful when God has the power to stop them at any time? Well, God's had that power forever. That's the whole thing is being fulfilled as God planned it.
Now, they were being persecuted for his name's sake.
Yes. You can't have a martyr if you don't have an evil side of the good and evil.
We would like to, we like our free will until it's used against us. God can do anything, but he gave us the freedom to do evil. And a lot of people can't handle that. They can handle the part where they get to do what they want, but they can't handle the part where people get to do what they want against them or against someone they love. That's the rub.
It's hard for men to do what's right instead of what feels good.
Yeah.
Or what sounds good, or what looks good. or doing what is good is the hardest choice.
Somebody has to be really rooted and grounded in their faith, like these martyrs here. They're going to stand up for the name of Christ, for the person of Christ, no matter the outcome, if it means death in this fleshly body, because like me, I said, not just, I'll use myself for example, these martyrs, it don't matter if they take their life in the long run, because they really have a firm faith, believe in the long run, they're going to win. In the long run, when Christ comes back, my reward stands in. There is no wavering, no doubt, no question. That's what, I often wondered about how someone could be a martyr or how they could go through that. I've got to be willing to stand up, and with him revealing to me the understanding that it might be the end now, but that's not the end.
Yeah.
I got to trust in him. My faith is in him. Then in the long run, I'm the victor in him.
When
They
you,
saw the
when you say
invisible.
that, I think of Christ saying, fear not, for I have overcome the world.
Yeah. And there's a reward for those who
And
think
that's-
not. And if you're willing to give this life for that life.
Yes, fear not.
Yeah, but if your faith is, if your faith, trust, there's where it's gonna stand out. Do I really believe? Do I really trust? You can say what you want, but you'll live what you believe, or you're willing to die for what you believe.
Does everybody agree with what you just said?
Mhm.
Does anybody disagree? Well, see, that's all that matters. That's the purpose of this lesson. That's the purpose of this book, is not to get us all to agree, which is what's water. I don't think water meant Babylon. Well, it's, none of that matters. That is the purpose of this book and this chapter. And what he said, I think everybody agrees to.
I
So
can't
we agree.
have that without the Holy Spirit giving me that.
Right.
We agree on the stuff that's important, and that's the main point. This still gives us meat.
Right.
Even though we can't explain every detailed verse of it. So, thank you for being here.
You know what, Roy, just real quick, we would never know how much Jesus loved us if it wasn't for the insanity that he went through
Yes.
to prove it. How would we know the depth of his love without him marching up that cross and expending all human strength until he collapsed?
I mean, he couldn't have made it without help.
I mean,
We
that
got-
tells
we gotta-
us what Jesus thought about it.
First of all, we need to trust what he says. And the second of all, if we have problems there, he'd give us an example of why.
Okay, that's it. We'll pick up again next week. Larry, we'll see you next time.